Hi, my name is Johanna. You can call me Jo. This is sort of like my first YouTube video for my channel, in which I kind of want to just talk about like books that I read and books that I enjoy, and also probably talk about manga because I consider manga like literature as well. But I kind of wanted to start this channel as just like sort of an outlet for me talking about like books that I'm reading. I have a degree in literature and I'm really passionate about literature. I've been kind of reading for like my whole life. I started reading like pretty prematurely, like when I was quite young, and I basically haven't put down books since then. I feel like it's like a main personality trait for me at this point. And I kind of want my first video to just be about my top 5 favorite books. I used to have like a really different list of my top 5 favorite books, but in the past couple years I've been living in Korea and I'm kind of a huge asshole, and I really only like to read like physical copies of books, and it wasn't until recently that I was able to use my Korean debit card online because I was having like a bunch of trouble with my bank because the banking system here is like really crazy, and I could only really order books on Coupang, which is like their Amazon. And if I was going to order books online, it was like kind of really hard to get one in less than a month, or that wasn't like double the price that it's supposed to be. And so I could really only shop for books in person, and like obviously I am a foreigner in a foreign country and English is not the main language spoken here, and so there's just like not that many options of like foreign books. That's not to say that there aren't options, because like the Kyobo in Coex and the Kyobo in the Kyobo Tower and the Kyobo in Moonlay and the Kyobo in the Hyundai all have really good foreign book sections here, but for the most part it's just Asian authors, which has been really amazing because it's allowed me to like open up the amount of authors that I was reading before, because I studied Gothic literature in school. And I found it like really amazing, and I was reading a lot of Black literature and also a lot of like Gothic and Victorian literature. I was kind of like set on these certain styles of books that I was reading, and so like my list since I moved to Korea has changed so much, and I just kind of like want an outlet to talk about all of these books I'm reading, because I still read like quite often, probably less than the normal book YouTuber does, because right now I only read like 4 books a month, so it's like 50 books a year, but I also do have a full-time job, so I kind of read on the subways and the buses here. Okay, now that I've kind of given you that whole spiel, let's kind of get into it. I don't, some of these books I don't have the copies of because they're still in America, and I just don't have them here. It costs like way too much money to ship stuff here, and I can't find them in the Kyobo bookstores here, or the YP bookstores, so... Okay, my first favorite book, which I actually did buy here and did read here, but I loaned it to somebody, and I don't remember who I loaned it to, so I don't have the physical copy with me, but I'm gonna put it right here so you can see it, and it's Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto. I hadn't read Banana Yoshimoto before I came to Korea. I had like my same favorite book for like forever and ever and ever. Until I read this book. It's pretty famous. I'm sure you've heard of it if you read any sort of Asian literature. It's quite big, and so I'm for sure not the first person to say that. It's won like a bunch of awards. It's quite old. It was made in the 80s, but it talks about a lot of like gay and trans issues in Japan. Banana Yoshimoto is a Japanese female author, and what I really like Banana Yoshimoto just like generally. I think every book I've read from her is really amazing and really poignant and really honest, but like Kitchen specifically, it was the first book I read by her, so maybe that's why it stands out so much to me, but it's also kind of like revered as probably her best novel. It just feels, sorry, I have little notes, it just feels like really warm and really honest, and the writing was different from anything that I had ever read before it. It was a translation because it's obviously originally written in Japanese, but it's been around for so long, and it's been famous for such a long time that the translation of it is really, really good, and it just... I don't know much about the Japanese language. I know more about Korean. I speak Korean fairly well, but the way that it translates is so honest, and I wouldn't say stiff, but I would say like really straightforward, but the book itself is so warm. Like it kind of, the relationship with the mother and between our two main characters is like so sweet and honest, and it's just like almost like what it feels like to fall in love, but in this like, I'm sure you have if you're watching this video, but you've probably read like Ernest Hemingway and like Little Women. If you can imagine like the minimalism period, but in a way that feels like warm and loving and like a hug to read, like Little Women does. It's kind of like that, but it still has like tragic things that happen in it and like sad things that happen in it, and it's just a really honest like portrayal of like the human experience and love and like what it means to be queer in Japan, and it's just like nothing I've ever read, and it's just like, yeah, it's just my favorite book. I can't gush enough about it. I really like it a lot. Getting back into minimalist literature, I went through a really big like minimalist literature like phase, I guess, because I read Gothic literature and it's so like ostentatious and in your face and has these like grandiose metaphors about the world and like what it means to like be a woman in the world, or like the power dynamics of the church and the people, and like all of these like huge descriptive paragraphs about like the way a steeple looks and the intricacies of the stained glass. It's like, you know, it's very descriptive prose. I kind of, when I was, I guess, in university, I kind of fell in love with minimalistic literature because it was just like so different from what I was reading for class, I guess. And so for like the longest time, I would say What We Talk About When We Talk About Love by Raymond Carver was like my favorite book of short stories / book of all time, up until like 2 years ago when I read Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto, because then that just like slipped right in and just took over. But from like 19 to like just like 2 years ago, like that was like my favorite book. And I would say it's like nothing like Ernest Hemingway. I mean, they're both minimalist literature, and Raymond Carver and Ernest Hemingway are often compared to each other because they had very similar personal lives. They were both horrible people, abusive alcoholics, hate them as people. But Ernest Hemingway is the father. Like when you call a celebrity mother, like that's mother, he's father of like minimalist literature. And Raymond Carver's like the alcoholic uncle, I guess. Ernest Hemingway's alcoholic father, and his alcoholic brother is Raymond Carver. But I find Raymond Carver's prose and like the way that he writes minimalist literature is a lot more romantic. Like What We Talk About When We Talk About Love is like super sad. All minimalist literature that I've ever read is really sad. But like especially for comparing it to like, or not Remains of the Day, The Sun Also Rises, like it's just a different kind of minimalism. It's, I would say, even more bare bones than Ernest Hemingway's minimalism is. Like it's even using even fewer words, if you can even imagine that it's possible. But it's like the simplicity of it is so, feels like home. It feels like a more honest way to experience life, because we don't experience life in grandiose metaphors. We experience them in like in a minimalistic way. And I feel like, especially like the title story, What We Talk About When We Talk About Love, is so raw and real and honest. How many times can I say real and honest? It just is like one of the best works of minimalist fiction in my opinion. And so yeah, What We Talk About When We Talk About Love is my second favorite book. Listen. Okay, in this next part, I very confidently and loudly say that it is Beloved, but it's actually Kindred by Octavia Butler, and I swear I am not a fake fan. Please forgive me. I know that I just said that I love minimalist literature, and that's really true. I do love minimalist literature. I feel like it's a really honest way to read about and experience life through novels and through stories and through poetry. I feel like minimalist literature is so real. How many times can I say that? But on the other hand, I also like non-minimalist literature too. I read a lot of non-minimalism, and I do also really like sci-fi. As a controversial opinion, I feel like a lot of people don't like sci-fi, but they're wrong. It's okay to be incorrect, and that's fine. So my third favorite book on this list is Beloved by Octavia Butler. When I was in university, I read a lot of Black literature. I was considering going into Black literature as my main focus of study, but then I just didn't think they needed another white voice in that area, so I didn't. But before Octavia Butler, I did not read that much science fiction. I just didn't find it very interesting. It just wasn't for me. It just, like, I was reading Gothic literature, girl. I was reading Gothic literature and minimalism. That could not be a further cry from the kind of science fiction in which I'm talking about, or which I was thinking of at the time. But I read Beloved. And it kind of, like, changed my perspective, I guess, on sci-fi, like, almost completely. I feel like the novel itself is really successful in talking about ongoing social issues in a lens that's, like, really interesting and, like, captivating story-wise. I don't want to spoil it too much, but it is about a girl who, like, can travel back and forth through time, not by will. Like, she can't kind of control it. It just kind of happens. And it's a really, really good piece of Black fiction that talks about systemic racism in America and what it is to grow up in systemic racism and try to, like, work your way through it. It's just, like, portrays these issues that I otherwise wouldn't have understood in a way that's, like, easy for me to understand, I guess, because, like, at the end of the day, I'm just a white girl, and I'm never going to be able to experience Black issues in a way that a Black person is able to experience them, and it's not any Black person's job to explain them to me. And so the best way for me to get perspective on it is by reading literature and, like, trying to understand it in my own way. And I feel like Octavia Butler, first of all, there are not many Black female voices in science fiction, which is so crazy to me. And I feel like Beloved has its place not only in science fiction, but also like as one of the best novels of all time, in my opinion. It's still so relevant to today, and it just talks about, like, ongoing systemic racism in a way that I think is easy for people to understand. And it's so interesting. Like, it's just well written. It's a really great science fiction book. And now I read, like, so much science fiction that it's absolutely crazy. And I feel like it's opened my mind to science fiction because it made me realize that there's so much science fiction out there that talks about political issues. And I understand that that was an ignorant, like, opinion that I had before. And that was just, like, my ignorance as a teenager. Like, I just didn't understand, like, what an important role science fiction held in, like, talking about political issues. And I don't know, Beloved's just so good. Like, I don't know if I can hype this book up enough. Like, I think that anybody, even if you hate science fiction, should read Beloved by Octavia Butler, or anything. She also has a really good, like, series called Parable of the Sower that's so good. And I've read, it's 2 books, and I've read all of it, and it's amazing. And it's like a dystopian, sort of, like, post-apocalyptic novel, and it's so good. So I think that, like, she just, in general, doesn't get her dues as well for her, like, ability just to write science fiction. So yeah, Beloved by Octavia Butler. Another book that, like, kind of, like, left a really big imprint on me, in the way that, like, novellas, this is a novella, okay? It's not a full-on novel, but I also said What We Talk About When We Talk About Love was one of my favorite books, and that's a series of short stories. So it's just books in this, not novels. And there's this novella called Passing by Nella Larsen. If you've read Black literature, you've likely read this book. It's quite short. It's an easy, quick read. And I've like I said, I read a lot of Black literature in university, but sort of my gateway into Black literature was this little novella by Nella Larsen. I was raised in a mostly white area, surrounded by mostly white people. Even though I was for sure the blue-haired liberal in high school, like, there are literally videos of me arguing with people in my classes about, like, social issues. I would say I was still pretty ignorant of, like, true discrimination that African Americans go through, and I still don't and never will fully understand those issues, but this book kind of helped me understand and opened my mind more to issues that African Americans face every day, and it opened my mind to reading a lot more Black literature, like W.B. Du Bois, James Baldwin, Langston Hughes, like, etc. Like, those are now some of my favorite authors, and because it's such a short read, it's so fast and it's so easy to get through, and the story is, like, compelling and interesting, and there's a murder, and spoiler, there's a murder, and it's just, like, a good story. It also talks about issues that I never would have thought about as a white person, And it does all of these things while just being well written and just really good. Like, it's just really well written, it's really good, and it's an interesting read. And I would say it's just like generally one of the books that I think about the most, like on an everyday basis. Like, if you're a really big reader, which if you're watching this video you probably are, there are books that just like are on your mind. And this one is one that like kind of stays on my mind because of the way the plot happens and what happens in the novel. It just stays in your little brain. And yeah, it did for me, and so that's why it's my number 4 on this list. Passing by Nella Larsen. Really recommend it. Okay, so this is a book that I actually have a copy of. I have another copy of this back home, but I wanted to read it again, and they had it in the Kyobo here. And it's just like one of the best books ever written. It obviously has been shown love, and it's really well acknowledged as a really good piece of work. Because it did win the Nobel Prize in 2017 for Best Literature, and I think that is like a well-deserved prize. I don't always agree with Nobel Prize winners in literature winning the Nobel Prize, which I think a lot of readers feel that way. I'm more biased towards books that have won the Pulitzer Prize, which I'll show you that in a second. But I also have to give it its flowers. Like, it took me 2 tries to finish this book. I'm so sorry, Kazuo Ishiguro. But it's because the beginning of it's like a little slow paced, and at the time that I first read this, I first started reading this, I just was not in the mindset for some reason to read a slower paced book. I was reading like shorties, I was reading short stories, I was reading books that were moving quickly at the time. I think this was like 2019, 2020, like right around the pandemic, and so I was just reading stuff that was keeping me busy. I kind of have a little bit of TikTok brain rot, and sometimes I have a hard time getting through slow things. And just like a couple months later, I picked it back up again, and I realized that I was a big dumb idiot. And the second half of this book is just so well done. It's about a butler during World War II, like brief summary, and it brings up really interesting points, and like insanely powerful ways of talking about times of war and oppression, and not being a perpetrator in those times, but just like an everyday citizen with regrets and love and stuff, like just not being able to feel like you should do something or you can do something in times of war. But it's like the war isn't like the main focus here. And like him being around during, Nazi Germany is not the main focus here. It's mainly about him in his life and like him missing love and like that kind of stuff. But I think that just goes to like further double down on the fact that like, I don't know about you, but like as someone who lived in America for a really long time and is still an American citizen, there's like, it's kind of like a tumultuous time to be alive in America. And when I talk to other people about it, they're like, how did you do it? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, I still have to go to work at the end of the day. And that's kind of what this is like, in my opinion. It's just like, I still have to go to work. And that kind of is my first video. Thank you for watching if you actually did watch this whole video. I've never said it before, but if you want to, you can subscribe to this channel if you want to hear me more, say more rants about the books that I really enjoy. And yeah, thank you so much. I will make a video soon. I'm thinking about making one about my top 5 favorite manga, because I do consider manga literature. So if you would like to see that, if you're watching this, which you're probably not, so I'll probably just do it anyways, please let me know. Thanks so much. Love you, bye!